Okay, I'm going to be talking about Natural Scene Designer 8. It's a landscape rendering program available for Mac and PC. Version 8 is coming out, and I have been involved with this program for a couple decades. I was an enthusiastic user of it, and occasionally I would contact the developer, Brett Casebolt, and say, yo, I found a bug, you need to fix this. Or I want a plea for you to add an additional feature. And through the years, he's gotten in touch with me more and more and more, and I've been more or less like a consultant in the development of this program. So version 8 is out, and I would like just to show you some of the new features in it, which I think are very useful. First of all, and this is a real big one, downloading elevation data from the internet. What you can do is call up various types of elevation data. You will see a map. All you have to do is draw a box on it, and the data will download and load as elevation data in Natural Scene Designer. It's really, really easy. Up in the top, you'll see a little box for reproject. So if you're using a different projection and you don't want it in WGS84, it'll reproject to your projection of choice. It works very nicely. Now, what kind of elevation data is available? An awful lot. Let's go through some of the various types. From the USGS, here's all the offerings. One thing to note is you could download the new 1 meter resolution elevation data from the USGS. Takes a little while because these things are big files, but they do come over. Then there's all types of world elevation data that you could download. I particularly like the Merit DEM. It's from a university in Japan. It's 90 meter, but it's super clean. Water bodies are well defined on it. I'm also a big fan of COP30 or Copernicus 30 meter resolution data from the European Space Agency. I use that a lot when I need higher resolution elevation data. And then there's the Polar Geospatial Center data. The Arctic DEM is available at 2 meter resolution, as is REMA, Reference Elevation Model of Antarctica at 2 meter resolution. And those data sets are just getting better and better with each iteration. So it really is exciting. Basically, if you need to map anywhere in the world, you could just grab the data quite easily in Natural Scene Designer. Now, there is a little bit of a hitch. Before you could grab these data, you do have to register with these various data providers. It takes about 15 minutes. They give you an API key, you put it in. Once you do it, you don't have to do it again. It's in there for good, so you can just do it once and forget about it. So that's elevation data. I'd say that's like the main new feature. Now, Natural Scene Designer 8 also does NAPE import. So if you have a elevation model of some place in the contiguous US, you could download NAPE to it. Now there's good news and bad news. Brett developed this, so if you have that elevation model, NAPE would download automatically to it, reproject itself, and just drape itself onto the surface. Then the USGS Earth Explorer website, they changed their protocols, and no longer could be downloaded automatically. He's appealing that right now. But for now, he has taken that code out of the application. Hopefully, it will be back in. But nevertheless, you can go and download a NAPE individually and place it onto elevation models. I have an example here. This is Monhegan Island, Maine. It's a 1 meter DEM. And let's grab some NAPE imagery. You could either import a folder of NAPE imagery with all of the compressed images. Natural Scene Designer will just mosaic them and drape them onto your image, or you could do it one by one with individual images. And you have it in this dialog comes up, and you have a choice of which resolution you want to use. Almost always I go with 60 centimeter. Love detail. And then it's just draped onto your digital elevation model like that. Now, one of the really handy things with this version of Natural Scene Designer is, sometimes the imagery in NAPE is a little bit dark, or, it's too saturated, you don't like it. If you right mouse button click on any of the images, a hue, saturation, lightness dialog comes up, and you could change the color of it slightly. And this is really, you could either do it globally to all the mosaic NAPE images, or you could do it to an individual image. Sometimes you have side-by-side NAPE images, one's darker than the other one. This way you could kind of balance them up without a trip to, say, Photoshop to do that. And here's the results draped on Monhegan Island. It works really nicely. Okay, next up is 3D background trees. And I'm kind of curious, show of hands, how many people put 3D trees on their map? Okay, I knew there'd just be a handful of people. This is something that I do fairly frequently, and what do I mean by 3D trees? This is Acadia National Park, Maine. It's a 3D oblique view, obviously, and you can imagine this if it was just a bare naked digital elevation model. It really would not capture the feeling of Acadia National Park. So what I did is I put 3D trees. Natural Scene Designer has a whole library of trees that you can use. Where they go on the scene, in this case, I used a tree map, a raster image, black and white. Where it was black, that's where trees would be planted. Where it was white, there would be no trees. And you can see there's no trees growing in the roadway or the parking lots. One thing to notice that these trees here are a mix of conifers and deciduous trees in the lowlands. That's pretty typical of Acadia National Park. But then when you go higher up in the mountains, it transitions more to conifers and are a little bit lower in height. And with Natural Scene Designer, you can have a mix of species and control where they go into a scene. So background trees have been a feature of Natural Scene Designer for a long, long time. But Brett has done a lot of work revising the trees, remastering the trees. This is the full library of trees that are available right now. They look a little cartoonish in this scene. And some of the species names are kind of funny. That redwood looks more like a balsam fir or subalpine fir to me, not a redwood. What's interesting about these 3D background trees, if you're using them on a 3D oblique map, if you're pulled back just a little bit, most of these trees generally look the same, especially deciduous trees. The crowns of them kind of all merge together. But if you want to really get specific in the tree type, you can. Let's take a closer look at these trees. If you really, really want to go closer in, the trees now have species-correct bark and leaves. Now, they're not as nice as some, architectural rendering programs, and I would never, use trees at this scale. But they are a lot better than what they used to be. You could actually see the needles on that pine. And you can create the trees through a dialogue here. It's really kind of cool. This is the ponderosa pine, kind of the default one. And if you want to change how it looks, you could change the leaf color or needle color, the bark color, the size of it, the percentage of leaves. So if you just want bare trees in the wintertime, you could do that. And if you hit that new seed button in the upper right, it changes the morphology of the tree. The branch structure changes, and you have a slightly different tree that you can create. And here we are with that same ponderosa pine. It's a different seed, and you can see there's fewer needles on it, and I've changed the color. So it's a fairly major difference that you could change these trees. Now, you could create entire libraries of trees. The previous version, Natural Scene Designer, allowed you to have 4 trees. This new version, you could have 100 different trees that you place into your scene. And here we have different species, but if you just wanted to have, say, all ponderosa pines, you're somewhere in the West, you could make you could put 100 different ponderosa pines, all of them a little bit different, and they will populate your scene. Now, what Natural Scene Designer does, and it's really neat, when it populates a scene with your trees, it randomly scatters them around the scene so you don't see much duplication at all. Another thing you could do is you could save your tree collections. So suppose you're doing a map of somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, you could have your Pacific Northwest trees, save them, and then when you do another map of the Pacific Northwest, you could call up that collection once again. And you can see all the controls below for varying where the trees go into the scene, and they're, I mean, for example, you can specify the elevation, how dense they're going to be, their size variation, et cetera, et cetera. And let's move on. Now, texture shading is something that Natural Scene Designer has had for a while. Now there's a texture shading settings panel. What you could do on the left is call up a default texture shading. On the right is a window showing the texture shading blending with your shade relief. And you could vary these things a lot. Here's the controls for controlling Leland Brown's wonderful texture shading. Here's where they will go onto the scene. And this is what I did to it. I upped the texture part of it on the left. Look how noisy and ugly that thing is, but watch what happens to that. I specify on the right that it's only going to go on slopes greater than 35 degrees. So it's going to be on high angle slopes. These texture shadings will appear on shade relief, plane oblique relief, or 3D oblique views. Here's a 3D oblique view of Glacier National Park without the texture shading that I just created. And here it is with the texture shading added to those higher angle slopes. You can see the rock bands a lot closer. Take note, Brandon. Oh, and wherever there's a flat area in the DEM, if you get the lake tool and shift-click in those flat areas, Natural Scene Designer will put a water body there. And the water can have reflection, you can put waves in it, but so if you want to add shimmering water bodies to your scene, it's very easy to do. And when you shift-click into a flat area, it fills just the flat area. The lake does not fill the flat area in every elevation below it. So that's a kind of a nice feature. Okay, while beta testing this, I, of course, had to make lots of maps, and I just want to quickly show some of the maps that I made doing this. Here we are, Mount Katahdin, Maine. This is a 1 meter DEM and draped with a 60 centimeter NAPE image with a little bit of bump mapping added to give tease out the textures. One of the things nice about Natural Scene Designer is you could bring in a shape file. In this case, I brought in a shape file of trails, draped it on the image, rendered out the image. So I had a raster image at certain dimensions. Then you could spit out the shape file as an SVG with a bounding box that matches the raster image, and then an illustrator just plopped those trails right on top of the raster image. That's how I got the trails into this. Mount Timpanogos, this is in Brandon's backyard. This is the view he sees. It's a pretty amazing place in Utah. You can see the cirques up there. This is, again, a 1 meter DEM, 60 centimeter NAPE. I used texture shading to call out the rock bands, and you can see little tiny 3D trees that I added to the scene up at Timberline. And this is what the mountain actually looks like. So Natural Scene Designer can kind of approach reality if that's really what you want to do. This is the northern Patagonia lakes in Chile, and this was created from Copernicus 30-meter data with world cover 10-meter land cover plopped on top of it. I have to confess the volcanic plume was put in Photoshop. It's actually a volcanic plume from the USGS of Kilauea, so it's drifted a bit south. And this last slide is, again, of southern South America. This was from 90-meter Merit DEM. Natural Scene Designer can either render scenes planar or spherical. This is a spherical render. And you can see the curved arc of Earth's horizon there. So with this sort of end of the world map, I will end my presentation and take any questions. Oh, I have one more thing to say, and I don't get a commission from this. Natural Scene Designer will cost $199 new, $99 for an upgrade. The Mac version will be out in November, and the Windows version will be out sometime in early 2025.
here. All right, questions for Tom?
Thanks so much, Tom. I agree that having the ability to just have access to all those DEMs in one place is like amazing, and it's such a time saver. Does it? I have kind of like two plugs, and most of this is maybe I've forgotten about it, but I feel like someone like you, you're aware of what sample or what resolution DEM is best for what size map, but that's always the thing that I think stumbles a lot of people. Have there been any, like, now that there's so many available in Natural Scene Designer, I'm mostly asking you to, like, hey, these are, these DEMs are available and best for these scale maps, and or can you also resample DEMs within NSD?
Yes, you can. It's you just go to resample, and you could, if you wanted it at a lower resolution, that's pretty easy to do. I mean, my general advice for most people is if you've got a digital elevation model that's kind of busy, downsample it.
Right. Yeah.
Less is often more.
Yeah.
My other rule of thumb is if you're draping imagery on it, you always want to have higher resolution imagery on top of your lower resolution DEM, and not the other way around.
Is this still going to be delivered on a CD-ROM?
Yes, unfortunately, yeah. To activate Natural Scene Designer,
You should maybe bundle it with a CD-ROM reader.
yeah. So you need a DVD or CVD reader. It's a long-standing complaint, and Brett has not fixed that issue yet, unfortunately. Okay. Thanks, everyone.